Everyone's in. Okay, so round two, Board of Directors meeting, Windham School District. Today's Tuesday, April 8th, 2025, 12:05 p.m., and I'm calling the meeting to order. So first up would be correspondence. I know we did receive correspondence from Michael Pelton, but that's been kind of put under old business, so we don't need to discuss that correspondence piece. We have it on the agenda. Is there other correspondence anyone wants to bring up or that I'm not thinking of? No?
The only one is
Okay.
Michael Pelton, I think.
All right. So moving along, public comment. Is there anyone here for public comment? Okay, seeing none. And there is, just to be clear, there is it is me and BCTV. So I am the Lone Ranger in the school building. So for the portion of the minutes, there is nobody in person. And I guess I can do a quick roll call to help Meredith with the minutes. Myself, Dan Roth, and Kate, as well as Bob Tebow, Kathy Edgerly, Heidi Russ, Michael Pelton, and that is the list of folks that are on so far. So changes to the agenda. Does anybody have any changes to the agenda? Perfect. Okay, moving on to old business. So bus and transportation. Michael has on. He sent an email. I'm not sure if we want to read what he had requested, or if Michael, if you want to speak to what you had emailed the board. What do you prefer, Michael? For us to kind of read your email?
I'm trying to fashion lunch here, so I prefer if you guys would either discuss it or summarize it or read it or something other than.
Okay. Daniel or Kate, do you have access to that email, and would you be able to, or do you want me to pull it up?
Yeah, I can pull it up and do like a brief synopsis.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, I'll just go ahead and I'll just share screen on this guy.
There you go.
Yeah, so this has been, can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, so this has been a discussion that's kicked around a couple times. And what it's about is that we receive a couple different revenues for transportation. And Mike has put together a couple numbers of 24 actual, 25 year to date, likely what we're going to land on the 25 budget and the 26 budget. And his central point about this is that we are transporting a number of kids outside of what we transport for our Windham kids, so the kids that go to elementary, the K through 6. And those would include the middle and high school kids, and then there's, of course, our kids. And by his figures, I think what we were seeing is something like half of the kids that ride the bus, maybe a little less, are not the elementary school kids that we pay tuition for. And the funding structure currently, and this is a fixed number from my understanding, but it's this number that he's calling into question, which is the revenue from the SU of what we get back from MUD when it comes to the calculation that Lori set up for money back for our transportation costs. And one of the thoughts around it is that there's a couple of things outside of just, say, the miles and the gas that's required, but the maintenance, the bus replacement, I think are the central things. So our budget towards the actual cost of running transportation. One thing that jumped out at me, and I haven't looked up the budget, but maybe Heidi can confirm, is that there's looks like a drop from what we got in 24, going into 25 and especially and in 26. So that's my first thought on it. I haven't looked up the costs and validated numbers. I think it's an interesting question of, is there room to negotiate what Lori set up in a funding structure for revenue back from the SU? What would that entail? Is there a contract that we're locked into, and there could be a window for contract negotiation to at least kick off the conversation? And then I guess the other question would be where would that conversation exist? Would it be with the executive board? Is that a good place to kind of kick off the, hey, we're running numbers, or at least one of our public has run the numbers, and I can certainly make my own pass of this is what we're taking in, this is what we're getting back. Maybe we can make it a little more equitable towards Windham.
I mean, it's the West River Board, not the SU. I know it flows through the SU, but it's really just the West
Okay.
River Board, of which
Okay.
Windham is a member, keep in mind.
Sure.
So any increase in revenue that you receive from the SU through this flow through does increase your expenses as a member of the West River. I mean,
Okay.
only a small amount, obviously, because it's dispersed
Sure.
in all the towns, but just keep that in mind as well. I don't know the formula of how it was created. I don't know what the agreement was. Heidi may or may not know. I don't recall ever being in a board meeting, even in the 7 years as principal of Leland and Gray, where I heard anyone even talk about this.
Okay.
So I don't know if it's really an SU straight calculation. It doesn't need board approval from the West River Board, or whether it's a negotiated agreement between the West River Board and the Windham Board. That I don't know. I bet Heidi does connect with Lori from time to time for continued support, and I think she could probably find that out, unless she already knows off the top of her head right now, which she's shaking her head. She does not. So I think we could do some legwork into that to find out and get back to you guys as to how was that developed. Was it based on and again, it was based on a time when there were no elementary students on the bus, right? It was straight secondary,
Sure.
which now the elementary students are going there at no additional cost or expense or revenue. I mean, so I don't know how that works. But the assumption is that Michael points out is that a district that receives tuition, or a private school that receives tuition, is not obligated to provide transportation. So really what you're talking about, in my mind, is asking them to generate some revenue for your elementary students, or to renegotiate the secondary student revenue, more specifically.
Yeah, and I see Michael has his hand raised.
Yeah. Go ahead, Michael.
As I recall, and I could be mistaken, but as I recall, historically, the money that's coming from the West River Board, or wherever it's coming from there, I think it's listed as 7,800 or something like that. Now it used to be 11, was actually based on our transportation of students that were actually in West Townsend and being transported to Leland and Gray. I don't know how many students there are currently. When I was driving the bus, there were, I believe, three. I think it was three that were West Townsend students that we picked up on the hill and brought down to the high school. One was a elementary student, and their sibling brought them from the high school to the elementary school. But I don't know how it is now or what it looks like now, but I do think that there's a larger conversation that, clearly there's a funding imbalance, and the funding or the costs are going up. And I think that we as a district have very little control over what our costs are. And at some point it's going to sort of come, push will come to shove. So we're going to have to figure out what we're going to do moving forward. And I do personally believe that an equitable funding of the bus, if we're going to maintain and operate a bus, would be much more conducive for our town. And I think we should provide transportation. I think it's reasonable. However, I do believe that we haven't negotiated for the funding, and the West River Board negotiates on a regular basis with their transportation company. And I think it would be interesting for us to see what that what what those negotiations / contracts look like, and maybe we apply a similar formula to our town for providing the transportation for students to West River schools. Thanks.
So just to clarify, so if the money was there to pay for reimbursing the bus for the expense of picking up non-Windham students, then you were paying the full amount to transport your own students, which is how it should be, as does West River to transport students to, like, they pay. So the West River District, the contract that you're referencing, Michael, with West River Transportation, pays for resident students of West River to get to the school, to get to Leland and Gray, much like the Windham District pays the transportation to get to the secondary students at Leland and Gray as well. So it's really the same thing. It sounds like you're getting revenue for picking up additional kids to save them money on having to have to add that route. So that is not so it doesn't feel to me like that's
Well,
you negotiate that if there are still students on that, but I don't even know if there are still students on that from Townsend or not.
No, but here's, at least from my perspective, I mean, I could be totally, completely wrong, but the town of Windham itself, the district of Windham, does not need to operate a school bus. It's not within our, like, really at this point, we have no students, right? We tuition everybody out. If we choose to provide transportation, we are via a stipend. We've made a decision to provide transportation to our elementary students, and I think that's appropriate and effective. However, the students that are being transported to Leland and Gray for middle school and for high school, that's really under the purview of the district, not our district, but the West River District, right? So as a result, one would assume that if they are providing transportation for other students within their district, they would also be providing transportation for our students, which fall under their purview as the West River District. Thus, they should be compensating our town for providing bus service for their students.
Yeah, the only difference, the only thing I'd say is that you're thinking is a little bit wrong, is that you're not tuitioning kids to the West River District for secondary school. You're a member of that district.
Correct. That is correct. And we pay. That is correct. That is correct. And we pay for their transportation by contributing to the West River budget. So if the transportation is being provided for by the West River budget, then we are already paying for transportation of students. We should likewise be paying for the transportation of our students just through the West River budget, not through our town as well as the West River budget. So therefore, currently, we're effectively paying twice.
I see what you're saying. Okay, so then I would defer to Heidi, whether or not she can answer it now. What's in the West River transportation budget line? Does it what's included on it? If it's simply West River, this is confusing because the bus companies have the same name. The West River Transportation Company providing transportation for a variety of students, let's say, to get to Leland and Gray, which includes Wardsboro, Brookline, Newfane, Townsend, and Jamaica. If that does not include the ability to transport Windham students, then that would be something I think you'd have an argument there to make, that there should be some cost in there to include the Windham students, unless there was some dispensation given in the formula for the assessments of the Windham district to take transportation out of that assessment somehow. And that's the question for Heidi. Is it through a fee for service thing, Heidi, or is it through the regular assessment?
It's just through the regular, because Windham is a part of the Leland and Gray high school secondary part. The reason West River pays $7,800 to Windham is to compensate for Windham transporting their children to Leland and Gray. That 7,800, when Lori and I spoke about it, was based on mileage that the bus had to travel to bring those students down. I think the argument at this point is the bus isn't making a special, because elementary students are coming down the hill anyways, that the board is making a decision to transport them. The high school students are on the same bus as the elementary students that they are choosing to transport. So it was my understanding, and I will clarify this when I talk to Lori the next time, is it was based on a per mileage cost for the route that was driven down the hill to Leland and Gray.
So in other words, the way it's not based on Michael's earlier idea that there were kids being picked up from West Townsend, it's strictly based on the mileage. So it's basically like we're billing Windham in the assessment for transportation, but then we're reimbursing them the difference for their mileage.
It's not an assessment. It's part of the taxes that are raised for West River B under.
Right. What I'm saying is we're still, as Michael said, we're already charging them for transportation through that assessment. This kickback is in essence to make up the difference of what they're driving on their own to help balance what they're actually paying into the transportation assessment.
Correct. And that was when the Windham bus was just bringing their kids to the elementary school and making a special trip down the hill.
Right. So in essence, they haven't, by continuing to bring the elementary kids, they haven't added to their expenses at all. In fact, they probably reduced expenses because they're not doing a second run in town locally.
Correct.
So Kate has had her hand up for a while. I'd like to acknowledge her. Go ahead, Kate.
Thanks. And I might be oversimplifying this, but that 7,800 is only for secondary school students. It's oddly coincidental that the bus route that takes them, because Townsend and Leland are next to each other. In almost any other situation, that wouldn't be the case. But because they are, and I could be wrong, because I would love to get reimbursed for the Townsend kids, but technically they aren't, because that is tuition. They wouldn't actually be able to pull from the West River budget for that, because it's a different, right? Like, am I understanding that correctly? I mean, that 7,800 is only for Leland and Gray.
You are correct. You are correct.
Okay. So
your Windham Elementary budget covers the elementary.
Yes. So my kind of second half of that, because I want to understand it correctly, how does the stipend that we pay for children not going to Townsend play into, because what part of our budget does that pull from also? I was under the impression that was a similar amount, that a kid going to Townsend and a kid getting reimbursed to go to a different school were of similar amounts based on what it would cost for a bus to take them versus a parent. Is that accurate?
There's never been an official calculation of what that stipend was. It was literally a conversation the board had and trying to figure out what they had as money to play with and how many people do we think are going to use it. There was no check of mileage and how people are traveling.
Oh no, which makes sense too. I guess I just wonder, I don't know if we really have, we don't have a leg to stand on to say that they should be reimbursing us for the elementary students. I mean, that doesn't sound like a...
No, but the state does. The other part of your revenue is a transportation grant that the state funnels to Windham Central, and then we divvy out based on number of students in each elementary.
Okay, so it's not, then I misunderstood. So it's not purely just the count of the, okay, thank you.
Okay, and Michael, your hand was up. I don't know if you had left it up. I see it down now.
No, I have a follow-up, if I can.
Go ahead.
So my argument isn't that they reimburse us for the elementary students. My argument is that the cost to operate the bus is approximately $45,000 a year, and that we are operating the bus to transport 50% of the kids, actually slightly less than 50% of the kids, to Townsend, and we are operating the bus to transport 50% of the kids to Leland and Gray. And I believe that is an appropriate thing for us to do and to provide that transportation, because the bus needs to go that direction anyway. My argument is that the $7,800, even if you take into account the transportation grant from the state, is not sufficient to cover 50% of the cost to have and staff and maintain and plan for the next future bus. In fact, it's quite short. I would argue that, as you can see on the document that I provided, that I think it's roughly about $17,000 from either party or both parties would be an approximate low or minimum coverage to cover 50% of those costs. It sort of depends on how you look at the numbers and how you set the money aside. Basically, what I did was say that a bus is going to be approximately $90,000. It's actually probably going to be more than that, but I assumed that it was going to be $90,000, and you're going to put, let's say, $9,000 aside every year for 10 years. You could argue that it might go either direction, and therefore you might be slightly ahead of yourself or behind. But either way, the short story long is the cost for transportation is going up, and we are paying far greater than we should, I believe, for 50% of the transportation cost.
Go ahead, Bob.
So I was just gonna say one of the things that you might be thinking about is that there's always going to be a reimbursement to equal your expense, and in transportation that's not the case. So the state provides some transportation expense, but even if you take any of the other districts that operate and have transportation, a lot of that cost is borne on the taxpayers. Not all of it. The revenue that comes in from the state does not offset all of it. So to expect that you're going to get revenue from other places to offset the entire cost of your transportation might not be a reasonable expectation.
I'm not saying we're offsetting the entire cost. I'm saying 50%, because we have 50%.
50% is the entire amount of your elementary students, though, is what I'm saying. I just think I think your board can choose to ask the West River board to do whatever they want. And boards have the right to not transport if they choose to not transport. It's not a requirement. So those are just things the board has to consider. But you're never going to get a situation where you're going to get money back to cover your expenses on transportation. It's always going to be more costly to operate than what you're going to get in revenue. I guess that's what I want to say. But.
Yes. So I just want to say a couple things. So yeah, I agree with you that I doubt we're going to get that revenue to match, say, exactly 50%. But there was a dip from 11,000 to 78,000. So I'd like to understand that. And I think that goes back to Lori of what is that calculation that she does? And how is that funding structure? What goes into the inputs of getting to 1,000 or 7,800? So I think there's fact finding here to understand. And then, so starting with the calculation, and then I'd like to understand who exactly rides the bus. So is it 50-50 currently, or is there, is it 60-40, et cetera? And then I'd like to understand, say, if we were to suggest increasing that amount or having that conversation with the other boards, then what would the best forum be for that? Is there a contract or is there a window that we can do that in? So do you understand the three kind of fact-finding missions?
I don't believe there's a contract. I think it would be attending a West River board meeting. I'm happy to put some calculations together once I talk to Lori. And certainly, okay. I think one of the conversation pieces is that the federal level of mileage reimbursement has increased in the last couple of years. So I think there's something to be said about that. And I do think that the decrease from 11,000 to 7,800 was an actual Lori working with Cord to actually get the mileage and understanding what the route was that he was traveling. When
okay, he did that. So the change.
Right. And so, revisiting this makes sense. And I will work to put those things together, but there's no official contract.
Okay. Okay, that's helpful to know. Yeah, and I understand that there's if we increase this number on this side, well, it has increase in what our expectation from the secondary kids in whatever split in our budget, right? Not our budget, but their budget into our tax rate. But I imagine it'd be pretty minimal compared to, say, an increase back to 11 or a couple thousand.
When I was doing the tax calculations for Windham and for West River, it showed that it's according to the state and the student numbers, you're just about at a 50-50 with the students attending Windham versus the students attending Windham Central. Excuse me, West River School, Leland and Gray, sorry.
Okay, and so it is now 12:39. So at 12:31, we had a little bit of a glitch. We are now back in the meeting at 12:39. Kathy Edgerly is up next, but before we got disconnected, Daniel, I believe Heidi might have heard me say to get the numbers, and so that's something we can digest. Was there more to that request that you wanted to ensure before we move on to the next item on the agenda? Daniel?
Oh, no.
No, I think it's good. So yeah, the calculation that goes into it, the amount of kids, what's the split, and then just confirmation that there is no contract or window, and then we can kind of bring it to our next meeting and come in a little more informed. I'll pull some numbers on my end to validate what Michael had put together.
Okay, and Michael, I see your hand raised. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to just ask if it would be possible to also have an idea on how the numbers are put together for the West River contract. So maybe an understanding about whether it's a cost per mile or cost per student and how that might look in comparison to what we're currently doing.
Thank you. Okay. Think we've kind of gone over that round and round here. So are we good, Heidi? Is that clear to you? Awesome. Thank you very much. Moving on, update on the school building, transition to town. Kathy, you're on. Would you like to kind of explain where we're at with that process, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
The town has been probably informed by VLCT, among other people, that they should conduct a phase 1 evaluation just to make sure that there are no contaminants on the property before agreeing to it. And through the Windham Regional Commission, they are doing this on the town's behalf at no charge to the town. And so it's called phase 1. And then if they deem through their consultant, which in this case is Weston and Sampson, that there is something that needs to be studied, then there's a phase 2 evaluation, and that's also paid for by the Windham Regional Commission. So, just based on everything I've read, and believe me, I'm no engineer, environmental engineer, but it doesn't really seem like there's probably not going to be any contaminants. The question of the interior of the building is a bit of a different animal, and I've asked Windham Regional if they could kind of make a larger umbrella and include that, so the town would know, okay, there are some asbestos tiles in the ceiling. This would be the approximate cost of removing them. Or what about the floor, kinds of things. So I haven't heard back yet from them whether that will be part of the phase 1 evaluation, or whether the town might have to do that separately or not do it. I mean, it's up to the town. So they've already had the site visit, and I would imagine that the report might be completed at the end of this week, and then it goes to the senior review at Weston and Sampson, and then it ends up at Windham Regional. So let's say that, it would be complete by the end of April, and then everybody would have it through the real estate negotiations that I imagine will take place in the month of May and June. And then I'd like, while I'm here, I'd like to put a plug in just so you all know, and it's on the record, that we are working with the Vermont Council on Rural Development to facilitate a community-wide process to look at the needs, sort of a community needs assessment. And so they have asked, we had a tiny little committee just of Abby, Cord, me, and the VCRD. We threw a big net. We ended up with like 30 plus names. And then the VCRD, will choose 10 to 15 names. And we did a little matrix, based on age, whether you have children, whether you're retired, what part of Windham do you live in? Have you ever worked for Windham? Are you on a committee? Blah, blah, blah. So they have all that data. And then they will reach out to people and put together a steering committee or a planning committee to work on this. And then the net of it is there will be 2 public meetings, which will happen early this summer, and they will be opportunities for people to think together about the future of the town. There'll be a free dinner. And so the dates and the details of that will be circulated once the steering committee has been formed and they decide the best times and dates. And then there'll be flyers, there'll be a notice on the website, there'll be front porch forum posts, and so on. So some of you may get a call, and that's what it's about.
Awesome, Kathy. Thank you. And I would also like to take this time to urge families, anyone that may be even following this recording afterwards or reading the minutes, to have families be involved and making sure they're aware that there's lots of things kind of going on within our community. And that is an area I kind of see a need for there to be more voices from. So thank you, Kathy. I think this is great. And I look forward to how that all comes together. So anything, anybody else on that or questions for Kathy? All right.
Hey,
Yes.
hey, thanks, Kathy. And
Yeah, it's awesome.
You're kind of a rock star, Kathy, for the town here. So we appreciate you.
not just even kind of.
Awesome.
Kathy, the forms that I sent you, do you have anything else?
Yeah, no, those are great. No, those are good. Those are fun and fine. And I just have to finish up 2 questions on mine, and Taylor's expecting them all this afternoon. So he just finished the talc mine assessment, and now he's ready to start. He did already the site visit though. So he's got that done. And the only thing is that there is an oil tank buried there, but from all intents and purposes, no one seems to think it's leaking. And before that land was a school, it was just open space. So we don't really have a whole lot to worry about. It's not like, oh, this used to be I don't know, a garage, or this used to be some kind of a industrial zone or something. I mean, there's nothing like that. So we're good, I hope.
Awesome.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, Kathy. I know she has another meeting she's got to hop on to here. So, moving on to new business. Approved minutes from 3/13/25 and 3/26/25. I move to approve the minutes for both those dates. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Daniel, I didn't hear you. Did you get an aye from you?
I think he stepped away.
It looked like he had to take a call, Abby. I saw him answer his phone and have to walk away.
Oh, okay. So we have a quorum, well, we do have a quorum with him not present, so to pass the minutes, we have 2 ayes. I don't know how that works when one steps away. We're good to go? Okay, so motion carries and the minutes have been approved. Now, approve financials. I am going to be completely transparent. I only got to glance at them prior to the meeting when I got here today. So I don't know if Kate or you or Daniel even got a chance to look at them. Kind of our largest role here is the board to be looking at the financials and approving them. So if you both feel that you have looked at them and you feel very comfortable, then we can discuss going forward, but we may need to have a special meeting to just get those approved if that hasn't really been looked at by you guys, because I glanced.
No, I'd like to do a special meeting.
Okay.
Would you like me to go over them? Because I have them right in front of me.
Well, there's quite a few that are on there, and I know I had some questions. So,
My concern, and I totally don't mind waiting, but I am leaving on vacation this week and I won't be back until the 22nd. So if you have questions, it would be better to talk about them now. I do have a 1 o'clock call that I have to get on. I can read through them and then you can tell me maybe where your questions are.
So I know that I have a lot of questions regarding bill backs, about the assessments, that we have multiple quarters there for the assessments. There was some training stuff. There's a few things that I had that and like I said, I only glanced. So it's kind of hard when you're making a decision to approve financials if you don't have any time to digest what you're looking at. So it's been less than 24 hours, I think, since we received that information. So we're just trying to take a look at it. Not that we can't go over it, but I just wanted to make it aware that that's why we're hesitant. I'm not sure when Daniel gets back if how he feels on that, but it would be something if we did have to do anything, a special meeting, it would be very quick. I would think, I can come down here and specifically just get that cleared. But I also have concerns about and checking in with the other board members about the policy items as well. So before we get through with the financials and potentially passing that along, the process for the policies is we would approve of them today to warn them for the next meeting. But if there was any edits or things that we wanted to change or just didn't agree with, that would be something, again, I would want the board members to have taken a look at and really digested before we warn something that we haven't really looked at. So I want to make sure before we get into that, both Daniel and Kate have had a chance to look at that and feel comfortable, because what we warned will be the actual document. Is that clear, Bob?
Well, this is considered a first reading. So if you have edits, you bring the edits back for an adoption at the second meeting. So that would actually be okay if you did tweaks to it. But I will also let you know, because you're in April, you still have May and June.
Right.
Because that process, some of these just need to be updated prior to July 1. So you really have time if you wanted to wait till May and June to do that, but you don't have to. You could tweak it today and still adopt it the next one, so long as the tweaked version was the one that's warned with the agenda when it goes out.
Right, and I wouldn't know what to tweak because I, again, was only kind of glancing through those, and I'm not sure about, I didn't really look at the selection of library materials or the privacy rights stuff. I wanted to kind of see what parents' rights were looked at.
Yeah, all three of those come from the VSBA templates. So they're all recommended language, been vetted by the attorneys to the VSBA. So, and granted, you certainly, you don't operate a school, so like having a library selection materials is a silly thing for you even to have to consider. But we went through this with Stratton last year when the law requires it. So you just pass it in.
Right.
So, yeah, but yeah, those are all VSBA vetted by their attorneys.
Okay, so now, Kate, what are your thoughts? Because I'm not sure if we have Daniel back yet on to just hop kind of back to the financials, because I know Heidi has a meeting that she said she's hopping on at 1, which is in 8 minutes. If we were, I'm assuming you probably haven't had a chance to really look at them.
No, there's an email thing that I'm trying to solve, which is on my end, and I apologize for that.
Well,
Well, no, I know, but I wanted to be more prepared. So that being said, Heidi, I'm glad you're going on vacation. Well done for you. But
yeah.
I also think in the interest of time that's a crunch. And if we as a board had a special meeting to review those and then, I mean, is there any half an hour increment we could have you, Heidi, for before you leave? I know that's a lot to ask.
Probably tomorrow after 2 o'clock, I could find a half an hour.
Okay.
Thursday, I leave that day and I have back-to-back meetings all morning before I leave in the afternoon. So I could make a half an hour tomorrow, but I don't think you could legally warn it.
With enough.
Yeah. So the other thing is, if we have questions, I mean, we could try to make sure we find time before you leave on, to ask you the questions. But we wouldn't need you to be there to approve it. And once it's approved, even though you're on vacation, it could still get handled in your absence, correct?
Correct.
So, as far as the panic on our end, we would only have a couple days, but I know I'm working tomorrow, hopefully. So, the 2 o'clock timeline wouldn't work for me for a meeting. Plus we wouldn't be able to warn it unless I ran out the door right now. But we could do something quickly. We lost Daniel again. So,
you can email me questions and I can respond to them. And then hold your special meeting and then if Bob was there, he could convey the information to Sue to get the bills paid.
Excellent. Okay, so that's what we'll do. We'll hold off. Everyone will dig into it as soon as they get some time to really take a look and digest questions, get the answers from you before you leave. We'll schedule a special meeting specifically just to approve the pay order. The pay order, again, the number will I have you right here because that I don't have in front of me.
Yep, okay, we have it right here. Pay order number 11.
Yep.
And the amount is $16,797.46.
Perfect. Okay. So there's that. So thank you, Heidi. We won't keep you much longer because I know you've got to move along. We will get that taken care of. And
can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
When you guys receive these warnings in an email, right? The DocuSign things in email as board members?
Yeah.
When do you get those?
I got it less than 24 hours ago.
Oh, you just got that?
Just haven't looked at anything because it's just got sent to us. So that's why.
The timing of that with your board meetings is a challenge. And maybe Heidi and I can talk offline about how that happens and the timing of that, because maybe you might be a month behind on some stuff. We'll have to see. But obviously it's preferable to be up to date. So maybe we can change when those emails go out. I don't know, but I'll talk to Heidi offline.
That would be lovely if we can have a little bit more time to review stuff. So I know back when I was working for the state, I would leave work and it was like an hour before I was coming to the meeting that I was getting it. So that was really, I couldn't even read it in the car. So anything that could grant us more time would definitely be very much appreciated. I think we're likely, since we've lost Daniel, the policies, we'll maybe discuss those at the next special meeting that we have. So that leaves us with the superintendent report, Bob, and I'm sure you've got a slew of information to update us with. So I will give you the floor, please, sir.
Yeah, so the short stuff, I mean, you guys have seen some emails, probably the flurry of them since Friday, but I'll try to give you the short version. I did send an email to all board members this morning and families with information about that. But the short version was that there was an attempt for the federal government to force states to have some kind of a secondary attestation that we are following the 1964 Civil Rights Act in order to receive title funds. And of course, the 1964 Civil Rights Act has been interpreted the same way for many, many years. But it was really the interpretation of that has changed. And the feds are asking schools and states to sign off on that new interpretation. So that was a little concerning.
Can you explain to me what that I got lost and I was trying to look that up this morning. What is the
So in the letter I sent out, it should have a link to what they call a Dear Colleague letter from the federal government. And they described things like they want to not allow schools to have anything that they don't want you doing anything that puts forth things what they call like a DEI initiative would be something they wouldn't agree with, things like that. So obviously Vermont has a lot of state laws in place to protect students, and that we want to make sure that we're still following and still receive the title funds. So that's why the pushback came. And so at the time, the state had said that they were going to force superintendents to sign individually for each of those things. And the superintendents pushed back and said, this should be a state issue. This has never been done by superintendents before. And eventually the Secretary of Education did reverse their position, and they issued that joint letter with the Attorney General's office late yesterday, saying that they were going to do it as a state letter, and they were going to affirm that Vermont follows everything the way they're supposed to, the way the law is intended. And thank you very much. And so, but anyways, there was a whole bunch of back and forths going on, and so I shared something with families because I had received some emails from families and staff who were concerned about me signing off on something they didn't want me to. So I never signed anything. I just allowed the state to kind of work through it on their own. That was based on legal advice that we received as well here at the SU. So that was really the main update, that has now been resolved. It's now in the state's hands. They're going to interact with the federal government on that regard, and that's one less thing. Of course, there's always a lot of other things happening at the state level around some of the education bills that are being put forth right now. And I don't know how much detail you guys want about that, but basically the short version there too is that it appears as though the original Senate Ed bill that had actually drawn some district lines, those maps have gone away. And now I think it seems as though the House Ed proposal is going to be the one that might get some traction now, which is flip-flopped. And that one, instead of having the legislators draw lines, it asks for a commission of some sort to be set up to do those line drawing of the new redistricting and to have that submitted to the legislature by the end of this calendar year. And the makeup of that, I'm sure, will change from what is in the bill. But at any rate, that's happening. There's calls for statewide calendars, statewide financial programs, statewide information systems, and statewide graduation requirements. There's still class size stuff that's out there. The funding formula is most likely going to happen, although we're hoping that the new version of that will be a little bit more generous than the first one that was thrown around. And
another study.
Sorry?
I said they're doing another study.
Well, on that part, I don't know if they're doing a study on that part. I think the other piece of this, that's the timing. The governor's proposal was pretty quick, and it seems as though in at least in House Ed and in Ways and Means as well, that they're looking at sort of a tempered rollout with more time in between to kind of look at things and what the impact is. So it looks like this will be, if they get their way, it'll be a multi-year process rather than like just done in 2 or 3 years. We'll probably expand a little bit further than that. And so that's kind of where they're at right now. I'm happy to answer any questions people have about that as well. So yeah, what do you got?
We have Michael Pelton as the last one here. So go ahead, Michael, that's your hand up.
I'm curious if you can see any trends regarding the redistricting and how that might affect us as a tuitioning town.
Yeah, so there was initially, I mean, in the original Senate Ed proposal, there was, I would say, to the west part of Vermont, because there's a large collection of full choice districts over there, Windham, Stratton, et cetera, that there was an attempt to create that area to be a supervisory union and to have the non-operating districts merged into one non-operating district, even if they weren't contiguous, so as to sort of protect the choice elements of that. In that model, Windham was still in the Southeast District, which means district, one, no independent things. So that in that regard, you guys were in the broader single district that went from Springfield all the way down. But because that map is off the table, I would say that it's really anyone's guess. Is this commission going to get created? Will that pass the governor's signature? They don't have the votes to override or veto anymore. So will that pass his muster? And if so, who's on the committee? What does that look like? What are they writing up? How does that look? Where's Windham fall? You guys, like Windhall and Stratton and places like that are more isolated geographically. So it really depends on how they do that. The tie to Leland and Gray for secondary is the sort of the string, if you will, that sort of that you have to see whether they could sever that or not. I suppose they could in the redistricting, but it really is unknown at this time what that could look like. So I would say wait and see what bill actually gets passed, and then wait to see if there is a commission, what that looks like, and then go from there. So I was told that commission, if it was formed, would be a subcommittee of the commission that was formed last year. So it wouldn't be a separate commission; it'd be sort of serving underneath that one, the committee to fix public education or whatever it was called. So that's all I got now, Michael. I'm sorry I don't have more information. It's still in the works, But write your legislators if you have questions or concerns about how that could look and who you want in the room for that. I think those are important things to have them be aware of.
Definitely, and just so that the community is aware, our board has put that on the radar with our attorney. So as far as how that's going to impact our district, and so we do have those folks looking into that as far as what our argument could be if we had to make one. So
the last thing I'm just going to add is that the SU board at their last meeting did become a signatory to the Rural Schools Alliance, which is, if you guys know what that is, it's sort of a broader in Vermont group or collection of school districts and SUs that have individually signed on, or as individuals or as boards sign on to this group. This group does pay for lobbying to support small schools in essence. And I think it's really built around, trying to protect small schools and keep them open. But the SU did hear a pitch from Dan MacArthur, the Marlboro board chair. Marlboro was the first in our SU to sign on to that. He came and pitched the idea of the SU board. The SU board did sign on. River Valley's last night heard a similar pitch. So if you guys were interested, I know you don't have an operating school, but if you were still interested in the tenets of, protecting small towns and choice or whatever you want, you could reach out to Dan MacArthur, Abby could, and see if it's worth, if the themes align with what that organization does, you could have him come and do a mini presentation. Then you guys could agree to be a signatory on that as well, or you could just sign up as individuals as well. So there's a whole email list that talks about the legislation as sort of like fast and furious, all the things that are happening and the changes. So that'd be one way to kind of stay in the loop on that one as well.
Excellent.
But that's it.
Okay. Excellent. Well, I think, so Dan, I know you were on and off there, but we've got crazy weather going on up here in Windham. So I appreciate you doing your best to be here with us. We are going
just to give you guys info, my Starlink dish flew off the roof. So, but it's working. So that's good to know it's that durable. But had to get up on the roof and put it back on. So I'm back.
All right. Thank you. And I'm glad you're okay and that happened safely. So we are going to schedule a special meeting and approve the financials as well as the policies that are coming up, D8, C8, and B3. That is language that was done by the VSBA, but I just want to make sure you guys have all read that and are clear on that before we warn that policy to be approved. So we can go over that at a special meeting. It should be super quick. Heidi is leaving to go on vacation by Thursday. So if you get a chance and can between now and tomorrow go through the budget, if you haven't, any questions, ask them of her. I barely glanced at it. So I really just want to look at it before we approve it. And then if we have questions, ask them of her before she goes on vacation, and we can have our special meeting as early as next week. I don't know if that works for you guys, if like next Tuesday at noon, or we want to, this is way, it's only not a huge way out. There are regular bills that are in there. We want to make sure get paid. But there's other things that I just kind of wanted to get some clarity on.
Abby, just so you know, I will also be traveling and not available next week. So, but you don't need me for any of that stuff, I don't think so.
Yeah, it should be a super quick meeting, but I just don't want to sign anything unless everyone's really fully informed, and it was a real short turnaround time to look at that. So,
Next Tuesday at noon works for me.
how about you, Kate? Is noon Tuesday? And
I'm
then,
putting it in right now.
okay, so we'll have a special meeting. I'll get that warned and out and posted. We'll send that to everybody, and we'll go from there. So our next meeting will be April. What is that?
15th.
15th at noon. Okay. And for BCTV purposes, I think you will not need to be in person. You can zoom in if you want, as it'll be super quick. Excellent. So with that, I see nothing else here listed on the agenda. We didn't add anything. So it is 1:09 p.m. and I will make a motion to adjourn. Can get a second? All in favor?
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you guys. We'll talk next week.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Bye.